but I've recently, you might be interested in, see if it's opened up yet. I've recently been working on some more.
That's scary.
I've been working with V-Ray and Grasshopper. Yeah, it's super cool, and you can get some really crazy animations out of this. But I would say that right now, V-Ray and Grasshopper, I'd kind of consider it like a beta version. So I wouldn't really count on it for anything like if you're really serious about it.
Nice.
But it's a little dark probably from what you're seeing, but I'm not sure how clearly that's coming out. But that's just a draft animation. Like you can get
that's really amazing, especially for the attractor point. Like the first time I tried to do something similar, I had to use 3D Max, and I didn't know even Rhino.
Oh yeah.
I had to do manually keyframe each. I was doing actually fountain, but it's a similar concept. Like when the guy walks, there's a fountain around him, start pushing water.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But it was a pain in the ass to keyframe each one individually. Wow.
So you would have to keep working in between 3ds Max and Rhino at the same time?
I didn't even know how to use Rhino. Like that was 10 years ago. I was to do something for a graduation project, but that's pretty interesting if you can link directly V-Ray with like you're showing me right now.
Yeah, you'd have to try it, but give it a good try and then determine whether it's like kind of developed enough for what you're trying to do. Because like I say, it's not V-Ray for Grasshopper does not have all the functionality that regular V-Ray does. And I found that there's some like big issues, but I've been able to kind of get around a lot of them. A really obvious one that you'll find really quickly is that you can't actually texture map in V-Ray Grasshopper. So, but in the V-Ray, in the actual V-Ray settings, you have to tell it like how big you want your texture to be. So there is a way to do it. You just can't do actual texture mapping yet. So a lot of these materials, I just didn't texture map them at all, but they kind of like worked
these
out.
data are NURBS?
Sorry?
Or these data in V-Ray, he gets the NURBS, or you have to convert them into mesh via Grasshopper?
Oh, it doesn't matter. It'll take anything. So this guy here is a mesh, and it's taking it here, but it will convert. It will convert everything into the geometry. I think it converts everything into mesh geometry. I'm not sure actually, but you can put any type of geometry into it. The only thing I have to warn you about, and hopefully you remember, because this took me forever to figure out. But if you're putting a surface into this geometry input, do you know how a trimmed surface works? Like, do you know what it means for a trimmed and an untrimmed surface? You know what I mean?
Like Boolean, we're talking?
Well, when you have a surface that's like a triangle.
Okay.
So so this is an untrimmed surface, right? And if I put some curves on it and I trim that, Rhino NURBS modeling, or at least Rhino modeling, doesn't really accept like 3-edged geometry as real geometry. So this is actually still a full. So if you turn on the control points, you can see that the points are still there from the original surface, because this is actually still a full surface, but it's called a trimmed surface, right? So it's still in terms of its data, it's actually still a square, a rectangle, but it's actually but the data says like also after you keep it trimmed. So the trim, the amount that it's trimmed by is just like is kind of just a data value, right? So a lot of geometry that looks like it's a triangle or whatever, it's still actually a full rectangle. It's just been trimmed. And and the reason I'm telling you that is just because in Grasshopper, I've noticed sometimes when you put in a trimmed trim geometry like a triangle, it will not accept the trimmed version. It will just put in the full box, the full rectangle. So all these triangles went in as like rectangles until I figured out. But what I figured out is all you have to do is put it into a brep component. I don't know why this works, but I just had to put the trimmed surface into a brep component and then put it into the input tab of the geometry. So it still works. I just had to do that little workaround. If you can see those curves, and then I generated a surface from it. And then this is a trimmed surface. It will say right here in the dialog box, it says, I'll just open it up. This trimmed surface, and that just means that it's really a rectangle that's trimmed into a triangle. And I had to put that into a brep component. For some reason, V-Ray accepted that as geometry that worked. I'm not sure. That's all I can tell you. But if you're having any,
but at least it accepted it.
Yeah, it still worked. It works fully.
I was already trying to figure maybe you should use loft with 2 lines, but no, that's wrong.
Yeah. So it ended up working. But yeah, it's pretty cool. You can do a lot of cool stuff in V-Ray, and the reason I'm using it, I mean, I guess there's definitely other softwares to use it, but I just like how the scripting interface works, and I can program all the lights and everything. I was using the lights to basically create like an attractor script where it follows him around, and pretty much the entire scene is created in Grasshopper, and I never have to bake anything because the only thing that's really in Rhino is just a few lines, and then everything basically is in Grasshopper. Wow. Even the lamps, like there's only one lamp that I designed over here, and then I just use these points to just remap where the lamps go. So it's kind of nice just to be able to stay in Grasshopper. But this is like it's kind of a buggy script. Takes a long time to load.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of meshes and trimming going on, but
yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, usually trim and Boolean command takes a lot of RAM.
Oh, I don't really use any. I try never to use like solid intersection commands, like any of these ones, like any of the solid intersection commands. That's like a last resort thing, right? I'm sure you've noticed, right? So I always try to, when it comes to these ones, I was trying not to create solids, but I had to create solids just for the sake of rendering. So I do it right at the very end. And this is just an extrusion. I think if I go to the bottleneck navigator, the biggest one is this union. It's a region union. It takes 5 minutes to calculate.
Whoa.
Oh no, yeah. And this one takes 5 minutes. The surface, the boundary component. So basically, I just disable this whole section here when I'm working on the actual shape of the script, and most of it works okay. So yeah, it's not perfect. So I'm not like gonna try to oversell you on this idea of using V-Ray and Grasshopper, but I've like had a really good experience with it so far.
It have a huge potential.
Yeah.
Wait, even the guy is rigged in Grasshopper?
Oh yeah.
You have a lot of patience, my friend.
Well, okay. So what I did, there's an Adobe service that seems to be free, or maybe it's because I have an account. I'm not sure, but I downloaded a FBX file. I think, is that right?
FBX,
you ever used FBX? And I downloaded an FBX file of this guy from this Adobe program, and I exported it with Blender. I exported the FBX animation as individual step files, or object files, and then I found this weird component called local code import that imports object files into your Rhino layer, and then this code right here, everything here is basically taking each one of those objects, and then it's basically transformed the object files is basically him taking one single step, and then this code right here is taking that one step and then it's transforming it onto like whatever curve I draw. So if I draw this like this angle, this curving curve, then the guy will just follow that curve. So I didn't really like I didn't really model him, but I just modeled the script to take that animation, those animation frames, and make it follow that curve. Definitely going to make a video on that, because once it takes a bit of time to set it up, but now that it's set up, in this Adobe program, I can just download like any different person or any different character. They have a bunch of different characters and a bunch of different movements, and then I can just download the files and then put it into the script, and then I can just have a bunch of people like walking around and stuff.
Oh.
So eventually, I'm just gonna make one like giant animation with a bunch of people walking around, and I found one where a guy's just sitting on a bench, like moving a little bit. So I'll make some benches over here.
I salute your patience, especially with adding 5 different people.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's a pretty interesting animation. Can we go back to it a little bit?
Oh, sure. This is this is an earlier one that I did. It's really dark. I think it's probably kind of dark from what you're seeing.
Yeah, it's a little bit dark. I get you trying to more focus on the light, but it's also nice to see the whole atmosphere a little bit.
Oh, it's because I added lamps into this one. I haven't created an animation with the lamps, but I did create this animation. But I have some. This is a really low quality animation. It's a draft GPU, and I have some better frames here. I just haven't turned it into an animation yet, but it looks pretty good with. This took about, I think, 4 minutes to render. So to make a full animation, it'll probably take.
The frame, yeah.
48 hours or something. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to leave it overnight, but.
Oh yeah.
That's pretty cool concept.
Yeah. So so with Grasshopper, they actually just like March 17th, they had a new update that was so useful. They added a denoiser component right here.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it, I don't know if this will come up on the screen, but if you do like a GPU draft animation like this one, it's really, really grainy. I don't know if you can make that out from your screen. And then this is what it looks like when it's denoised. So I don't know if you can tell the difference.
No, V-Ray added that feature, but
yeah. So V-Ray has regular V-Ray has pretty good denoising software, but they just added it to V-Ray for Grasshopper, and it made it was a total game changer, because now I can render a GPU frame. If I'm using the GPU, I can render a frame in like a minute, and then I can just add the denoise component to it, and it actually looks pretty good. It's pretty acceptable for like a draft animation.
Yes.
So yeah, just on that note, there's just you can choose you can choose whether you're using your CPU or your GPU for rendering. Cool. So if you have a good GPU, you can actually crank out like frames pretty quickly. And then you can change your quality, and you can change bucket rendering, all this stuff. So yeah, there's a lot to think about here. And if you have any other questions.
How long ago did V-Ray come out for Grasshopper?
When did it come out?
Yeah.
It's pretty new. It was like a year ago, or yeah, it was like a year ago or 2 years ago. Okay. At first, I think they were just yeah, I think at first it was just single frames or something like that. They started off with something very basic. I don't know if you're not really supposed to make something like this complex, because like this whole definition takes 10 minutes to actually calculate. But so I don't know if it's a really good idea. I'm just kind of doing it because I think this is going to be, I think once they develop it, like it's going to be really good, and I just want to know how to use it when that time comes.
Yeah. Well prepared.
Yeah. What was I was going to say some. Oh yeah, to make an animation, you can use they have a component, the timeline component. you just tell it how many frames you want to come out of your animation, and then it will spit out this. It has a timeline. But this, you put the timeline component right into the render component, and then all you have to do is render animation, and it does everything automatically. So it's
That's cool.
pretty easy to do once you have it all set up, and then you can use, and it will, one of the outputs is which frame it goes to. So I just put the frame into all the components that I want to animate, basically. So this is the person moving. It's this is what I'm using for the camera to follow the person. I think this is a human. I think this is a component from human to modify viewport, so it will follow the person as he's walking, and then obviously you can throw that into to modify your lighting, depending on, or you can do like a time lapse with the sun component. You can use the timeline component to change where the sun is in the sky to do like a time lapse, and it looks pretty good when the sun sets. It actually like the sky goes from blue to like being actually like yellow. And
you're using the V-Ray environment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.